Good morning, everybody. I think we should start now because study time is from 9:30. This is about theme 6, technology impact on the socio-economic, gender issues, ICT application to assess and monitor, strengthening market linkage and business models on post-harvest and value chain for livelihood security and employment generation. Session 3, this is business models on value chain and post-harvest use, FPOs, impact on income and livelihood security, employment opportunities in rural sectors. This session is to be chaired by Dr. P.S. Birthal. Dr. Pratap Singh Birthal, born in Jundabas, Bhiwani, Haryana, India on 5 December 1963, educated at Government High School, Juikund, Bhiwani, Haryana, Agricultural University, Hisar, 1979 and to 84, Indian Agriculture Research Institute, New Delhi, 1984 to 90, BSc Honors Agriculture, 1984, MSc Agriculture Economics, 1986, PhD, 1990, Scientist, Indian Veterinary Research Institute, Ijatnagar, 91 to 95, Scientist, Senior Scale, 1996 to 97, Senior Scientist, 97 to 2005, and ICAR National Fellow and Principal Scientist, National Center for Agricultural Economic and Policy Research, New Delhi, 2005 to 2008, Principal Scientist, Socioeconomics in International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, Principal Scientist, National Institute of Agricultural Economics and Policy Research, New Delhi, and he was also Director, Institute of Development Studies at Jaipur. He had received awards, Fellow Indian Society of Agricultural Economics 2017, ICAR Rafi Ahmad Kidwai Award 2016, NAS Recognition Award 2013 to 14, ICAR Young Scientist Award 1997, Indian Society of Agricultural Economics DK Desai Award 1995, 2001 and 2015, Agricultural Economic Research Association India RT Doshi Award 2004, 2008 and 2011 and 2013, Vice President 1997 to 1999, Joint Secretary 2001 to 2002, and Managing Editor 2012 to 2015, Chief Editor 2015 to date, Agricultural Economics Research Association, Vice President, Indian Society of Agricultural Economics 2015 to 16, Reviewer, International Assessment of Agricultural Science and Technology for Development, the World Bank 2005 to 2006, Consultant to various CGR institutes, the World Bank and Swiss Development Corporation member, Working Group on Animal Husbandry and Dairying, and 12th 5-year plan Planning Commission, Government of India. Too vast biodata he has, and this session will be co-chaired by M.I. Hossain. M.I. Hossain is currently serving as professor at Bangladesh Agricultural University, Mymensingh. He has more than 20 years of teaching and research experience in value chain, business model development, and agribusiness, and successfully completed several value chain development projects funded by national and international agencies, Japan International Cooperation Agency, CCDB Network, etc. He has also worked as value chain expert on promoting social, inclusive, and sustainable agriculture intensification in West Bengal and southern Bangladesh under CIG project funded by ACIR. He has experience in designing, planning, and conducting socio-economic surveys in rural areas of Bangladesh and Asia. He has several researches published in journals, special reports, and books. This rapporteur of this session is Dr. P.P. Samina Begum. And now I request Chairman Sir to conduct the session.
Thank you so much for inviting me to chair this and very important session on business models for value chain developments. Well, friends, you will agree with me that in much of the Asia, the agriculture sector is dominated by tiny land holdings, or you can say the smallholders. Basically, subsistence agriculture towards a modern face a number of constraints in their transition from subsistence to a modern agriculture or a commercial agriculture, what you call. And in this context of the business models or the value chains, if we look at, there are three main constraints that we observe from the literature in this transformation process. And obviously, of course, one of the most important constraints is that farmers' lack of access to remunerative markets. Why it is so? Because the smallholder farmers, they produce, little basically for their home consumption and little for the market. So the marketable surplus available with this group of farmers, it is so small that trading of it's in the remote markets, urban markets, or the semi-urban markets, it is not remunerative for them to sell it there, while the local markets, they are thin. And most importantly, we look at the business model kind of proposition, it is more prevalent, the value chains, etc. They are more prevalent in case of the high value commodities, whether it's the fruits, vegetables, milk, meat, fish, eggs, etc. And being these are mostly the perishable commodities, either they need to be transported immediately to the consumption centers, which is basically the urban centers, or they need some kind of processing into semi-processed products, that can be stored for 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 days. So this is again there is a lot of asymmetric information available to the farmers on the market conditions, on the prices, arrivals, and all those kind of things. And most importantly, there is a very high volatility in the prices of the perishable commodities. In the same, in a single day also, if you see the prices of, say, vegetables, so they fluctuate like anything. So this is one of the major constraints, and we have to overcome that kind of constraints when we move the smallholder farmers on the path of commercializations. Now, another constraint that I feel is that farmers lack of information. Farmers need information on various aspects, right from genetics to the goods or concern throughout the world, and particularly this part of the world, it is more serious because being located in the tropics, the frequency of the extreme climatic events, it has been increasing in the past and is predicted to increase in the future also. So with the farmer, they require information on, say, weather forecast and all. But unfortunately, farmers lack access to information. For example, in India, if you see that only about 40% of the households, they have access to information, but only 75% of them, effectively you can say that 30% of the farm households, they use information, look at the sources of information. Here, if you look at private farmers or the social networks, means farmer to farmer kind of exchange. So what we observed that particularly in India, and it is a situation I think everywhere in the South Asia, the public extension system, it is unable to reach to all the farmers. But interesting thing is that it is more efficient compared to the other kind of information dissemination systems. Now this is the another constraints. And finally, when we talk about the business models, finance is an important component of the business models, and farmers need finance to purchase inputs, to have access to technology, to for own farm creation of own farm infrastructure, and all these kind of. But at the same time, they are capital constraints, they are liquidity constraints, and this. Of course, the farmers' credit requirements, they are not so big, but the financial institution, they hesitate to provide finance to smallholder farmers because of the lack of collaterals for against which they advance the loans. And then that most important point here is the higher administrative and transaction costs associated with such small scale kind of loans, because the loan size of the loan is so small, the transaction cost or the administrative cost, etc., they are becomes very high in terms of whether in absolute senses they can be overcome through a value chain approach of the business models that bring together different stakeholders, so farmers, aggregators, traders, processors, exporters, and even financial institutions at a common platforms. So this is one of the observations from the literature. Yes, the business models or the value chain approach can be an effective way of overcoming all this kind of challenges in the smallholder agricultures. But here one thing what we should distinguish between what are the business models and the value chains. The value chains are basically built upon the business models. And these value chains vary in their governance structure depending on the business model they are based upon. Now let's see how value chains and the business model they differ. This distinction is important for taking up any kind of studies and all these kind of things. Now value chains, if you say they represent, organized links between producers, traders, processors, service providers that join together to improve the productivity or the value addition to the agricultural commodities. On the other hand, if you look at the business model, they refer to the ways in which chain actors and the activities they are organized with an aim to reduce the transaction cost or the improve the efficiencies. The transaction cost they may incur in provision of providing the inputs, technologies, services, and to manage the risk all along the value chain. So this is the key distinction that we have to keep in mind when we are discussing about the business models and the value chains. In fact, the business model is the base for creating some kind of different kind of value chains. Now, depending on a business model, the value chains may differ. There may be different kinds of value chains. So now business model say it may be a producer-driven value chains. A producer-driven value chains, of course, its main aim is to gain access to remunerative markets to reduce marketing and transaction costs and or to, for example, Amul in India, or they may take the form of some self-help groups. But one of the, limitations of this kind of value chains is said that the participants in this kind of value chains, they may face difficulties, in understanding the consumer preferences and market dynamics, and may also struggle to secure loan from the financial institution, because this is basically a group of the farmers, groups of the farmers, smallholder farmers who come together for a purpose. So they may not be able to have better understanding of the market dynamics of the financial institutions. So this is one of the limitations that literature says that value chains in this kind. They may be developed by, aggregators, traders, processors, exporters, even retailers. And for the main purpose here is that to have some kind of a quantitative and qualitative control over the production process, where infamize used power to identify the consumer preferences and the sorry, it was disconnected because of. Hello, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
So then that one of the major criticisms is that they may exert, some kind of monopolistic powers on the purchase. They may pay less prices to the farmers, and they may also be less inclusive as compared to the producer value chain. So here comes the role of some kind of facilitators. That facilitators, they're the non-governmental organizations or some governments. They may act as an intermediaries between producers and the big consumers, and they may take some kind of hybrid kind of forms of value chains. Means at the ground level there may be an association, say self-help groups or association of the producers, and they may link it to the contract farming. So these are some kind of facilitator value driven value chains. Now again, the advantages or the disadvantages and the cost and benefits of these value chains are still debated in the developing world. But what we observe is from the literature is that there is very less empirical evidence on the cost and benefits of these value chains. For example, like I may tell you, when in India, this contract farming, of course, started coming up. So there was one paper there arguing that these buyers, there is a unequal kind of partnership between the buyers and the sellers. Say the buyers being the big trader, the sellers being the smallholder farmers, And this contract farming, it is exploitative of the farmers. This is on the front of the inclusiveness. Another is on in the case of say efficiency or the benefits. So what the studies they used to do is just compare the yields of the contract and the independent farmers and conclude on that basis. And the main conclusion that was there is that contract farming is not beneficial for the farmers. So, but when there are contracts between the buyers and the sellers, the sellers, they provide different kind of inputs, technologies, services, assured market at the farm gate. So these benefits were rarely quantified in the literature. Now, here my purpose is that let the value chains, they should be evaluated for their inclusiveness and the efficiency, taking into consideration the all kind of cost, be it the production costs, be it the price, be it the marketing and transaction costs. In my own study, what I observed is there are not much difference in the yield of the contract and independent farmers, and but the major difference and the price also slightly higher price, but major difference, it comes in the transaction costs. The contract farmers, they faced about 80 to 90% less of the marketing and the transaction costs as compared to the independent farmers. This was one of the major benefit of the contract farming. Now, if there are no benefits, then why farmers will go for contract farming and all those kind of things. Now, the another benefit is, if you look at the literature particularly, that is kind of internal financing arrangement. But at the same time, if you look at the value chains, particularly in the broilers, here the firm, it provides chicks, inputs, feed, etc. That account for, you can say, 70 to 75% of the total operational costs. Now, if a farmer has to go to some banks, etc., he will have to struggle to seek finance for that activity, and the interest rate will also be very high, while here he pays no interest rates. So this kind of arrangements or the value chain of the contract farming, it serves as a financial institutions. Now, another major benefit, of course, particularly in case of high risk commodities like broilers and etc., it is the risk transfer. The arrangements are like that the farmers, they are paid, particularly in the broilers, they are fixed growing charges. They give it to the farmers, means say 5 rupees per kg of body weight of the bird. Now, when it is so, then the farmer is assured. But again, we have to be very careful, particularly in this kind of enterprises which generate a continuous stream of income. For broilers, there are at least six production cycles in a year. And the broiler prices, market prices, they are highly fluctuating in the markets. So question is that when the market prices are higher, the independent producer, they will benefit. When the market prices are low, it is the contract farmers who get the fixed growing charges, they benefit. So in that sense, the entire risk, market risk, it is transferred to the integrator or to the buyers. So it is not the responsibility of the farmers to bear any kind of risk. Another major criticisms, of course, with this kind of arrangements, particularly the contract farming, faces that inclusiveness of the system. Now, it is argued that the contracting firms, they are contract with only a few large producers so that they are able to reduce their marketing and transaction costs of contracting with a large number of small scale holders. But there is always a risk when you are concentrate on a few people for your supply, so they may default. If they default, then what is going to happen to the processing capacity of the firms and the sustainability of the firms? So here again, what we observe is that contracting with smallholder farmers, it is rather beneficial. And the reason is, of course, in South Asia, it is mostly the 90% of the holdings, they are small holdings. So contracting with them is, one is, it is, you cannot dispense with the contracting with smallholders. And another important reason is, if you contract with the farmers from this one small land holders, they are better comply with the terms and conditions of the contracts than do the large scale farmers. And finally, when we look at this study, this is for all the presenters in this session. Now, what's your you present? What are the lessons that we can draw to strengthen the interface between the value chain, among the value chain actors, or between value chain actors and the financial institutions and the governments, so that we can come up with some kind of, policies which are which can benefit, the farmers and the other stakeholders on the value chain. Well, friends, with some of my these opening remarks, which of course Dr. Sen requested me to have some brief, he requested me a presentation because of time, I could not do that. So I restricted my initial observations to this kind of things, and I request all the presenters to kindly highlight at least one or two major points, that can be utilized either by the industry or for the governments to improve, the value chain activities for the benefit of the farmers and the societies. We have, I think, 4 presentations in this session. And of course, my co-chairman, Professor Hussain, before he presents, I will request him to make some initial remarks. Professor Hussain, he is, at the Bangladesh Agriculture University at Mymensingh, Bangladesh, and of course, he will be making a presentation of, value chain of seaweeds and the to improve the blue economy of Bangladesh. Then we have my colleague, Dr. Shinoj. Dr. Shinoj is a senior scientist at Central Marine and Fisheries Research Institute at Kochi. And he will be talking about how to strengthen the value chains for agriculture and allied activities for improvement of the livelihood of the people in the coastal ecosystems. These are the 2 invited lectures, and both I request that you restrict your presentation to about 20 minutes, including 2 minutes for discussions. Then we have 2 more presentations, one by Dr. Priya Sadi. Dr. Priya Sadi is from, University of Ruhana in Sri Lanka in the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Now, she will be, I don't know whether, should I call him he or she, presenting on the value chain of marine ornamental reef fish trade in Sri Lanka. And of course, that ornamental fishes are becoming very important in the international trade. So we will be having some ideas on that. And then we have Dr. Samina Begum. She is also rapporteur of the system. She will be talking about conversion of the beans to chocolates, the value chain for the cocoa growers. I request these 2 presenters, Dr. Priyashdi and Dr. Samina Begum, to restrict their presentation to about 20 minutes. Now, I request Dr. Hussain, if you have some initial remarks or you would like to start your presentation.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Chairman. I am really happy to hear from you that you are going inside of value chain and business model. Now we are working on it, and in the developing country perspectives, in the government level and also in the non-government level, all of them are focusing on value chain perspectives. But how they can be limited and how they can be improved in business way, you are focusing rightly. And also you are touching the important point that information asymmetric that cannot be reached to the farmers, which can be available in India and also in Bangladesh and also in South Asia, as we might say. So I am not going to discuss our initial way. I will going directly to my presentation. As we have a time pressure, we have to finish within the time frame. As already Chairman mentioned that we have 20 minutes of presentation. So I will directly go to my presentation. Could you, moderator, show the slide sharing? Just open the slide sharing. Okay, I got it. So this is the title of my today's presentation: Analysis of Seaweed Value Chain to Improve Coastal Livelihood and Blue Economy of Bangladesh. And you might already know my name. This is Mohammad Ismail Hussain. I am working as a professor, Department of Agribusiness and Marketing. I have some co-authors of this paper, and on behalf of co-authors, I am going to present this paper to you, and I am seeking advice from you to improve and on to discuss some potential aspects that we can improve by using business model. The presentation is limited on the following ground. First, I will discuss the basic introductory part and problem identification, that is preamble of the study, and which is directly go to the methodology part, and I will follow the resultant discussion, and finally I will make conclusion, and finally made recommendation on the basis of my findings. So what we can see, how we can define blue economy, and we can reverse it to resource extraction from the sea in a sustainable way by conserving our sea, and also we can categorize this in marine and coastal resources, which is under in the blue economy. And we might know the total economy of the world is around 24 trillion US dollar, and by 2015 we are assuming that the total population of the world will be 900 crores, and majority of them depends largely from the sea for their livelihood. And how sea can be contributed, we can see that sea can contribute in aquaculture, mariculture, renewable energy, carbon sequestration, coastal protection, waste disposal, and many more ways that sea can be contributed as. In the case of Bangladesh, what we can see that around 81% of the resources are existing in the ocean, and only 90% resources available in the land. That indicates that there is a huge potential of sea in the case of Bangladesh. And at present, 500 varieties of fish found in the Bay of Bengal, and around 8 million tons of fish are available. And we can see that only 0.7 million ton of fish is catching each and every year. And we are guessing that a 45 billion million US dollar is trade is possible in Bangladesh by using these sea resources. And we are also assuming that the total GDP comes from the sea is around 5% by 2030. And we assuming that Bangladesh will be a developed country in 2040, and if so, and we can use sea resources in a sustainable way, we can reach our target in the period of 2041. And we can see what is seaweed, and what we might be know as the marine algae, are which is grouped in phytosynthetic non-flowering plant, which comes from three major groups. Red one is Rhodophyta, brown one is Phaeophyta, and green one is Topophyta. And we might know that seaweed is a versatile product which is used as a human consumption. In the total world demand, 80% comes from the Asian countries. From the Asian countries, China is the topmost position, which contributed 40% of the supply of total demand. In the case of Bangladesh, as you might know, there are 30 coast people in 19 coastal districts largely depend on the sea. There are 177 species of seaweeds, which is available in the coastal areas of Bangladesh. As coastal area of Bangladesh has a 480-kilometer long coastline and 25,000 square kilometer of coastal area, which is potential for seaweed cultivation from the coastal belt. This coastal area also widely potential because the land and the sandy and muddy beaches have the potential to cultivate seaweed. However, the seaweed in Bangladesh is an initial stage. The stakeholders, that means the farmers, that are not widely recognize the potentiality of seaweed, and they are not aware about the cultivation technique. And it can be possible if farmers can identify the cultivation techniques and they can cultivate seaweed, they can uplift the socioeconomic condition, and if they know the technology of cultivation. By this, the seaweed farming brings added value by contributing socio-economic development of the country through increasing farmers' income. For that, government take initiative to focus on the seaweed cultivation in the coastal belt of Bangladesh by initiating several projects, which ensuring food security and reducing pressure from capture fisheries, generating foreign exchange income, providing employment, extending alternative livelihoods, and creating opportunity for business and commercial investment. As you might know, seaweed is not domestically used in Bangladesh. This is the exportable item that Bangladesh can be export in coming years. Thus, this study analyzed the seaweed value chain sector of Bangladesh with the objective to focus on its governance structure, economic condition, environmental condition, technological, and socio-cultural dimensions. So, going to this, I have to follow the conceptual framework of value chain, as our chairman already described how value chain can be contributed in business development process. So, this value chain analysis is useful to assess the commercial viability of seaweed aquaculture as a farm carries out to produce a product or service for a given market for a particular consumers in the market. And it aims to identify which activities are crucial and which ones could be improved upon to increase competitiveness for the world market. This value chain analysis can be used as a means of financial accounting of all links or possible oil that connect the production and to the consumption side. The objectives of this framework is to identify the potential points of inefficiency that pass through the seaweed from producer to the consumer, which can be improved by the farmers, that can be useful for them to increase their farm income. By capturing the values generated along the chain is only possible if the value at each link of the chain is known. So firstly, we will know the value chain, and then we will go how this will be helpful to the seaweed farmer in the case of Bangladesh. So methodological part, I will focus on the selection of the study area. As you might know, the Cox's district, one of the most tourist area of Bangladesh, which is not only for the tourist area, but also economic zone where it can contribute to our national economy. So these Cox's districts around them and Teknaf and Upia and also San Martin are the potential area where farmers can use seaweed cultivation. For this purpose, for this study, we investigate or we select the study area of Cox's district or Cox's Sodor, Teknaf Sodor, and also particularly focus on the San Martin Island. Data collection. The data for this study came from two OA. One is primary data and the second is secondary data. The primary data will be are collected from the three different OA. First one is key informant interviews. Second one is focus group discussion. And third one is an interview of household and market actors. So for that, 5 key informant interviews were conducted and 2 focus group discussion were conducted. And for collecting the household survey and market actors, we have selected 33 households who are cultivating seaweed and 15 market actors who are trading seaweed in the market. The focus group discussion and household were conducted in the Coxbazar Sodor, as I mentioned earlier, Teknaf, Uke, and San Martin, Iceland. And household survey were conducted using the purpose sampling technique with the help of the Department of Agriculture Extension and NGO workers. And market actors will be were collected, identified by using purpose sampling technique who are engaging and trading in the during the data collection times. And finally, the secondary data were collected from different published documents and also national statistics and food and agriculture organization statistics. Data analysis, as we came into two different types of data. One is qualitative data and another is quantitative data. The qualitative data goes to the identifying the themes which will follow to the concept, and then finally reach with the theories. That theories guided us to which one that will be that we will focus during the business model setup. And the quantitative data that goes directly to the descriptive statistics, and some graphs and tables are prepared based on the objectives of the study. The results and discussion that we find from our study is that farming activities, as you might know, this is the initial stage of Bangladesh, so it is difficult to reach how the technology evolved. But we can identify several farming activities. First, the farmers who use or procure seedling as the beginning of the farming cycle from the trusted suppliers or sellers. Here we mention that suppliers because some of the NGO workers or donor agencies, they are the suppliers of the seedling, and they are motivated the farmers to cultivate seaweed because it has huge financial gain. So farmers are motivated and they are engaging through farming of the seaweed in the coastal belt of Bangladesh. When seaweed is transported from the markets to the farmers' field, they should be careful because it should be covered with tarpaulins, a plastic sheet, and wetted within seawater every 15 minutes interval. Because if we will not cover it and if we will not wetted it with seawater, all the seedlings will be destroyed and it not be germinated. Upon reaching to the farm site, the seedlings are immediately placed in the seawater, and that we call in the planted by tying to long lines. So this long line, this planting is the activity when seedlings are tied to long lines. The seaweed is harvested after 6 to 8 weeks of cultivation, and farmers harvested the full seaweed either by untying lines or cutting the raffia tie from long lines or transporting them to a silted house or drying platform, because seaweed need to drying before it goes to the market. So at the platform, the farmers grade the seaweed. What we might know is cooling, either to be dried or to be used as a seedling in further production cycle. So here are the some pictures that who show the cultivation practice of seaweed in Bangladesh. You can see in first picture, there is a bamboo stick, there is a rope for use for the seaweed cultivation. And in the bottom picture, it showed how farmer and his wife harvested the seaweed from the rope. And in the third picture, it showed that how housewife is drying the seaweed for the in the post-harvest treatment as a post-harvest treatment. So post-harvest treatment, as you might know, the sun dried is required, which takes about 2 to 3 days, depending on the weather condition. And the commonly used drying methods are spreading the fresh seaweed across the concrete slabs and hanging it in the bamboo racks or drying racks. The seaweed is evenly spread and regularly turned over to expose all angles of the sun so that it can dry regularly. The farmers assess the moisture content, and by sequencing the seaweed, the potential moisture content range is 30 to 38%. So the capacity to achieve this is depend on the species, location, and other conditions. And oil-dried seaweed is heavily covered with crystallized sea salt, which is preserved in up to 2 years because it is established a OA so that we can preserve the seaweed in storage when we apply crystallized sea salt. Marketing system of seaweed. So in the two form, we can identify two ways that seaweed can be marketed. First one is dried seaweed. Around 55% of the total harvested is goes to the dried seaweed and is goes to the raw materials in carrageenan processing industry. And another way it can is wet seaweed. Approximately 45% total harvest goes to the wet seaweed, and that directly goes to the consumption and also further production purpose as a seaweed seedlings. All farmers sold their seaweed to intermediaries, and there is the involvement of the intermediaries in the provision of credit. So credit is one of the essential way how farmer can be continue their seaweed farming. So farmers and intermediaries maintain good and honest relationship, which can ensure them to informal credit service, such as intermediaries can provide ropes, tie-dye, and seedlings for the production of seaweed. If farmer can establish a good relationship, they can obtain or they can find this informal credit from the intermediaries. The price range from oil seaweed to Caribbean seaweed below low, which is range from 8 taka 80 to taka 1280, which is very low in the context of world price. So this is the way of how oil seaweed is marketing. As we might know, there are two way of seaweed marketing. One is upstream marketing, another is downstream marketing. In the upstream marketing, we will two way which is considered. That is the farming activities, that is the post-harvest treatment. In the marketing process, when it goes in two ways. One is the drying process, another is the further production cycle. So in the drying process, as I mentioned earlier, it around 55% of the total seaweed goes to the drying process, and 45% of the total harvest goes to the further production process or consumption purpose. This is the Belusin map where business model can be initiated. Take the for the commercial viability of seaweed farming in Bangladesh. Here we focus on the marketing of dry seaweed. You can see that the marketing of dry seaweed requires 1 to 7 days, and sometimes farmers cannot able to sell their dry seaweed because in the local market there is a few demand of seaweed. Only tribal people can use seaweed at their consumption purpose. In the high class restaurant and in the some manufacturing industries such as biscuit industry and others, where they can use seaweed, but people are not aware of that. In the marketing process, they farmers directly depends on the intermediaries. They are depends on the direct application of the loan, or they are depends on the indirect informal credit, but they have limited contact with the processors, because as the intermediaries provide informal credit service, farmers have to sell their seaweed, dry seaweed to the intermediaries. So this is the price range based on the moisture content availability in the seaweed. In the farm gate price, it is range from 85 taka Bangladeshi taka per kg. The moisture content is 37 to 92%. In the processor level, the price of seaweed is 107 taka, and the maximum moisture content is 50%, which is we collect from the key informant regarding during our key informant interview. In the export market, the price of seaweed is range from 957 to 1,320, and the maximum moisture content is 40. During our focus group discussion and key information review, they are mentioned that the maximum moisture content is 40%. So this is the way how business model can be way forward, and what are the current state of seaweed subsector in Bangladesh, and the critical success factors. What we might categorize in 4 different ways. The critical success factor, one is quantity of the seaweed. What we can see sufficient dried seaweed supply. In the current state, we can see that low quantity and inconsistent supply due to limited drying space, and also technology that available for drying the seaweed. So in the future, the business can be run by providing loan to the upgrading their drying facilities. And the second one, the critical success factor is moisture content. As majority farmers do not aware of the moisture produce dry seaweed with more than 40% of moisture content through unpredictable weather and lack of awareness of quality criteria. So we can way forward by providing training on drying technology, and also build up awareness among the stakeholders or farmers. The Third one is quality. The critical factor is quality. That farmer lack of awareness of quality standards, awareness for the development of business in commercially viable. Lack of customer and appropriate and stable pricing is another critical success factor that should be focused. And in the current state, we can see that seaweed price is volatile and sometimes unsold. So there should be ensuring marketing mechanism and build consumer awareness to develop the seaweed subsector. Based on this, I can conclude that the price of seaweed is volatile and sometimes farmers are unable to sell their seaweed. The farmers do not sell directly to the processors. As I mentioned earlier, they are faced to rely on intermediaries. The weak negotiating position of the farmers in the value chain serves to characterize their low income status. So if we are able to focus on the dyeing materials or way forward, we can we can ensure the higher income of the farmers. There was low trust in relationships between processors, intermediaries, and farmers on seaweed quality. So finally, what are the recommendations based on the findings? The government should strengthen the marketing mechanism by focusing on critical success factors for dry seaweed by ensuring sufficient supply, enabling farmers to procure seaweed with low moisture content, and enabling appropriate and stable pricing structure so that such steps could transforming the prospects for seaweed production in Bangladesh. So thank you very much for your patient hearing. If you have any questions or suggestion, I am ready to answer of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Now the discussion, one or two questions if anyone has.
Dr. Hussain, this is Dr. Shinoj from CMFRI. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Dr. Hussain, is there any contract farming arrangement in Bangladesh in seaweed value chain? And what kind of processors and products are being produced from the seaweeds?
Thank you, Sino, for your nice questions. As I mentioned, that CU is the initial stage in Bangladesh. The NGO workers and also donor agencies, they are supporting the farmers. So they are not purchasing the dyed seaweed directly from the farmers, but they are establishing the linkage to the intermediates, I mean the processors. As I mentioned that there is a biscuit industry, as you might know, there is a biscuit industry who use seaweed as a flavor or as a ingredient of biscuit, upper layer of the biscuit. So they are purchasing seaweed from the farmers directly. So the donors or NGO workers bring those industry directly to the farmers to purchase the seaweed. But they are negotiating to purchase from the farmers, but not a contact system. The industry workers have not made any contact so that farmers can continue produce the seaweed. So another way, as I mentioned that there is a tribal communities who consume wet seaweed as a soup. So farmers can directly sell to the tribal communities, directly to the markets in the local packaging system, and not in those standard maintained in the standard criteria. So still now there is a initial stage. There is no contact farming system of seaweed in Bangladesh.
Thank you.
So if there is no other question or clarification, now I request Dr. Sinoj to make your presentation and keep track of your time.
Sure, sir.
Say maybe 15 minutes or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, for inviting me to deliver my lecture. I hope the slides are visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So The topic of my presentation is strengthening agriculture and allied production and value chain systems for income and livelihood security in coastal areas. So before going straight into the business models and various value chain related aspects, I will quickly rush through the broad economic changes that has been happening in coastal areas in India. What are the what are the key drivers and the kind of diversification that has been unfurling in the coastal areas, how this has resulted in the structure of crop production systems, and in general brought about a change in the market. So Dr. Sen specifically asked me to cover these aspects as well, along with the focus point, which is enterprises, technological and policy options, enterprises for developing coastal areas. So I'll start with how rural economy in coastal areas have been changing, and what are the changing contours. So some of you might already be been aware of the kind of diversification that has been happening in all over India, not just the coastal areas, but coastal areas also this has been happening, and we'll see specifically how this has been happening and what all types of diversification are unfurling in the coastal areas. So there are three types of diversification that has been happening. The first one is the diversification in food basket towards high value commodities. So because of the changes in demand pattern of major commodities, there has been a resultant diversification in the production profile towards high value commodities, from traditional cereals and pulses oriented production systems to livestock and fish production systems as well. A third kind of diversification which is happening is employment diversification, predominantly from farm sector, the primary sector occupations, to non-farm sector, particularly in the rural areas. So there are different determinants of this kind of diversification. Obviously, urbanization, gradual decline in poverty, and increase in disposable income, and an emergence of middle class in these coastal states have resulted in these broad changes. And people have been starting to eat out rather than restrict their meals within the households themselves. And over time, there has been a preference of processed foods, and technological change has also contributed to this ongoing process of diversification. Uh, Several studies have been undertaken on this. The chairman of this session, Dr. Birthal himself, has undertaken several studies on various aspects of the process of diversification. Not just in coastal area, but the entire India and in Asia. So studies have indicated that agricultural diversification has in general shown a small farm bias and had significant impacts on income augmentation and distribution, poverty alleviation, as well as resulted in increasing resilience of farmers to shocks. And this overall changes in enterprise composition has been driven, as I already mentioned, driven by the changes in consumption baskets from high value towards high value commodities. And the diversification in various enterprises has also resulted in broad basing of income sources of smallholders towards a greater share coming from livestock, non-food crops, non-farm enterprises, and so on. No. So the third component of it is a prominent change in rural workforce towards non-farm sector. This has happened all across India, and the coastal areas have been no exception. So people have been attracted more to non-farm, small scale non-farm enterprises, and in general the burden of workforce on the disguised unemployment that was there, that has been there in the agriculture sector, is slowly decreasing. So you can see the broad changes in the food consumption pattern. So clearly there is a decline of consumption of rice, wheat, and other cereals, particularly the core cereals too, and a clear increase in consumption of high value commodities like fruits and vegetables, milk, eggs, fish, chicken, uh, and so on. And this is with specifically the changes that has been happening in per capita consumption in the coastal states. So everywhere you can see that that general pattern is true, and it is more clear from the diversification index that was worked out for these specific areas. Even though these coastal states also include non-coastal areas, but if you go to the coastal districts, specifically the very coastal areas, you can see the same type of changes happening there as well. So, and in response to that, the share of high value crops in total value of output of agriculture has been increasing. So there is a steady increase over the last 2 to 3 decades. And total share of total high value commodities in total value of production has steadily increased from 30% to about 50%. And this is a change in area under various crops, and again there is a shift towards high value commodities. And this slide shows the changes in profile of rural households based on their principal industry of activity. So between 1993 and 2011, there is a clear decline of workforce engaged in as primary activity, engaged in crops, from 69% to around 52%. But at the same time, there is an increase in share of workforce in non-farm sector from around 25% to 39% between 93 and 2011 to it. So the change is around 50% annual change. And this is, you see, this classification of all the states in India under different depending on their share of rural non-farm employment. So all the coastal states are shown in red colors. You can see that they have predominantly over years from 93 to 2011, they have slowly shifted from the lower bracket towards higher brackets of rural non-farm employment. And states like the mostly the highly coastal areas like Goa, Kerala, Andaman and Nicobar, Daman and Diu, Puducherry, Lakshadweep, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, all of them come under the 40 to 60 and above 60 brackets. Because of the changes in non-farm employment, the income of people have also been changing towards non-farm sector, and at the all India level, about 40% of the income of smallholders come from non-farm sector. So in states like Kerala and West Bengal, this has been as high as 65 to 70%. Now, specifically coming to the coastal villages, the marine fisher folk who reside in the coastal villages, the marine fishing villages in India. The changes therein have been identified based on the marine fishery census data between 1980 to 2016. So you can see that number of fishermen villages have been increasing. Number of fish landing centers have got decreased over years. And although between 1980 and 2010, the number of fishing crafts have been increasing, after 2010, there is a very visible shift or reduction in number of crafts from around 2 lakhs to 1.6 lakhs. And also between 2010 and 2016, you can see an overall reduction in fisher folk population, which from around 3.9 million to 3.7 million. So this is a very clear shift, and this in generally indicates that people have been, there is a movement of people from the coastal areas towards non-coastal areas, urban centers, other areas of rural economy, mainly because of general dullness in the fishing occupation. Probably because of this might have resulted from declining profitability, resource crisis that has been happening in the marine fishing sector. So if you see the share of the occupational profile of fisherfolk in the coastal areas, you can see that majority of them in the fishing villages are engaged in fishing and fish seed collection, marketing of fish, various allied activities like making and repairing of net, curing, processing, and so on. And a very small share are engaged in other than fishing and particularly the non-farm occupations, but this share itself has been increasing over years. As per 2005 census, that was just around 2%. Now it has increased up to 5%. Fishing sector in general has been undergoing, has been experiencing considerable changes in India. You can see that the share of marine sector has been declining from around 70% to just 20%, 29%, whereas the share of fish production from the inland sector has been increasing steadily because of new culture systems, new species. So there has been considerable diversification happening in the fishery sector as well, with the new cultured species coming in the picture. Now let's just see the some promising enterprises for coastal areas and their economic prospects. The first one is I would like to highlight the role of mariculture. Mariculture is controlled culture of fish and fish species in marine controlled systems, particularly using cage farming. Several technological developments have been happening in this area. ICRCMFRI, my institute, has come out with several technologies like development of various types of HDP and GI cages, and also the technologies for captive breeding, hatchery production, and grow out. For a number of identified finfish species like cobia, pombano, sea bass, grouper, bream, snapper, garangate, bream, and so on. So because of these developments, the number of cages that are installed in the coastal seawater as well as the backwater systems have been increasing steadily. But there are again several areas of priority areas for development. We need to identify more suitable sites, and a leasing policy should be in place, which at present there is no leasing policy. If somebody wants to set up a marine cage in coastal waters, who is going to give him a leasing right? And so there is lack of clarity in this area, and also a shortage of seed and feed materials, and there are no systems of disease diagnostics for emerging diseases management. And entrepreneurship has to be developed. More and more promising entrepreneurs have to be attracted towards this field. Value chain constraints are there, and with sustainable mode of cultivation or culture with minimal negative environment impacts. So this slide shows the specific the economics of cage farming in marine as well as brackish water and reservoir systems. So presently, about 3,000 cages are installed in open seas, mobilizing about 550 self-help groups in 7 maritime states, involving around 3,850 fishermen and fish farmers. So a marine cage, a typical the finfish takes around 8 to 10 months for completing its life cycle. I mean, to mature, to be in marketable size. So in marine cage culture, it yields a net economic benefit of about 2.5 to 4 lakhs, depending on the species cultured. So a farm gate price of 350 to 500 rupees can be obtained from such culture, and BC ratio in such systems ranges from 1.5 to 2.1, indicating profitable culture models. And in case of brackish water systems, net economic benefit ranges from 0.5 to 3.5 lakhs per cage, and a BC ratio ranges from 1.1 to 1.6. Breeding and seed because of the developments in cage culture and increasing adoption of cage cultured fishes. So there is a growing demand for hatcheries and seed production in these areas. So this is again another promising enterprise where around 300 man days can be per unit can be generated, and a net average return of 1.1 to 1.2 lakhs per annum can be obtained. From a very small unit that produces around 2,000 juveniles per year. And several technologies for induced breeding and hatchery production of carp fishes have also been developed by ICR institutes. So there was a national freshwater fish brood bank has been set up in Bhubaneswar to supply the brood stock, and then more than 400 hatchery units are distributed all over India. And this has resulted in some increase in the availability of fish feed. And grow out farming of freshwater system of fish like rohu, katla, major Indian carps. This is another promising enterprise where there is Jayanti rohu is a very promising fish species with a significant economic potential. And Benami farming is another promising potential where around total economic surplus of 3.96 lakh crores has been estimated. And seaweed culture, as Dr. Hussain has indicated, in Bangladesh, India also has considerable potential for seaweed culture. In Park Bay area in Tamil Nadu state, several number of farmers are engaged in this the culture of seaweeds. With promising economic potential. ICR CMFRI has identified potential areas for extending culture, and it is possible to produce as high as 8.4 million tons of wet weight over a period of time. Using seaweed. So seaweed, and also there has been policy focus in this area. New institutional mechanisms have been developed. So PMMSY, Prime Minister's Matsya Sampada Yojana, has a high allocation for this seaweed production, and it is targeted to produce up to 1 million tons of wet weight of seaweed in a period, over a period of 5 years. And mainly self-help groups are involved in this. Women are highly, they are mostly engaged with not much of labor is required, so there is rich prospect for gender empowerment in this area. Earlier there was contract farming arrangement some 10 to 12 years back. PepsiCo was engaged in contract farming, and they had good experience, but after some time they had to wind up their activities due to several constraints. I think mostly value chain related constraints. And so seaweed, you can see that economic potential, it has considerable employment potential. It has economic prospects, like the BC ratio is around 2, and an average net return of up to 4,580 per raft per year, with a total of 18.32 lakhs per hectare per year is possible to be earned from seaweed culture. And an improved culture where seaweed is integrated with cage culture is called integrated multi-trophic aquaculture system, that has even more economic potential. Bivalve farming is another promising enterprise, and the new technologies for hatchery techniques have been developed by ICR CMFRI, which can be scaled up. And apart from that, a number of fish processing technologies have been developed by ICR Central Institute of Fisheries Technology based in Kochi. New packaging technologies have been developed, processing technologies have been developed. Several battered and breaded products, ready to eat fish products, they all have promising potential. And you can see that the economic potential of various types of post-harvest and processing activities in this slide. So CFT have shown that fish waste also can be utilized to produce fish silage, foliar spray, and all these enterprises. These are all suitable for small holders, small entrepreneurs, and one unit of 500 kg capacity silage based on fish feed can give a BC ratio of 1.56 and as high as 9,900 rupees per day as profit. So I will conclude in just 2 minutes. We need to, several strategies are required to boost the coastal ecosystem, coastal economy, and markets. Further stress is required for a diversified farming system, which include crop fish, livestock integration, mariculture, and aquaculture. Productivity enhancement has to be taken up because many of the systems are low productive right now, and entrepreneurs have to be ready, and high quality satellite fish fish seed production centers are required, because right now we don't have very good quality seeds available, and there is clandestine trade, particularly in case of tilapia, pangasius, and so on. Legislation can be brought about to ensure feed quality, because most of the feed that is being circulated in the production systems are of low quality. So production risks have to be contained, and disease diagnostics have to be taken up, and several new promising technologies like recirculatory aquaculture systems, bioflow culture, aquaponics, they all have promising potential, and they can be taken up. Strengthening markets is another major consideration. Farmer producer companies, this is a new solution for better value chain integration, as well as developing better business models. The PMMSY targets the establishment of around 500 new FFPOs in coastal states. So far there are no prominent FPOs in place, but we have to wait and see how this will be developed, and how this can result in better value chain integration in the fishery system. Contract farming, so far there are no successful cases, but this is another promising area where pilot projects can be undertaken. And also number of options like strengthening certification units, development of smallholder processing units, they are all required. And also another significant priority would be boosting financial inclusion in the rural areas. Right now, only less than 1% of priority sector lending reaches the fisheries. Most of the fishery sector thrives mostly based on informal credit, where interest rates are very high. It ranges from 60% to as high as 150%. So our studies themselves have shown this. So we need to have more microcredit schemes, introduction of Kisan credit cards, where fishers have some flexibility in taking credit and repayment is possible. And enhancing social safety nets are also required, because right now there are not many systems in place for aquaculture and fishery insurance, particularly because both fishery and aquaculture are very risky enterprises. And this is a very high priority. It has to be given high priority. So these are all, apart from that, post-harvest, strengthening post-harvest system, branding of products, certification systems, they are all a priority. Policy WACOM is there, particularly with respect to leasing and management of reservoirs for mariculture, for developing mariculture. So the state has to take this as a major priority, and develop policies to bring about bridge this policy WACOM. And price support systems can be there. So these are all some of the entrepreneurial and policy priorities that we need to fix for the fishery sector in general. So thank you.
Thank you,
I
Shinu, for giving an excellent overview of the coastal agriculture in India, and the suggestions to improve upon that. Now, if anyone has any queries or clarifications, no questions? Okay. Thank you, Shinu. Then
thank you, sir. Thank you.
I invite Dr. Priyasadi. Yeah, please restrict your presentation to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Just provide the salient finding related to the value chains.
Okay. Good morning, all of you. I am from Sri Lanka. of the Institute of University of Pune. My topic is value chain analysis of marine ornamental fishery in Trincomalee, Eastern Sri Lanka. Marine ornamental fishery is based on coral reefs. Coral reef is one of the best productive ecosystem of the earth. This industry is a multi-million-dollar industry which is contributed to producing livelihood for thousands of people. This industry has begun in Sri Lanka in 1930, but it has not expanded as a large-scale industry until 1950. After the 1970, it became a large-scale industry by distribution all over the world. The value chain concept has introduced by Mariculture. It is important to strengthen management system of the industry. So the value chain describes the full range of activities which are required to bring a product or service from conception through the different phases of production, delivery to final consumers, and final disposal after use. The study aims to analyze the value chain of marine ornamental fish industry in Trincomalee, Eastern Sri Lanka. The study was based on Trincomalee, which is the located in eastern province in Sri Lanka. The papers of the Trincomalee based on the fisheries. The study was carried out throughout 2 years period from 2019. There were 112 respondents who participated. Of them, 90 fishers, 6 middlemen, 9 exporters, and 6 government officers were interviewed. Those peoples were related to the reef areas of Kuchaveli, Coral Cove, Pulmadale, Coral Island, Duck Bay, and Sampur areas. The stakeholder identification was done using snowball sampling techniques. The other data were collected using semi-structured interviews, small group discussions, and participant observations. Furthermore, key informant interviews and informal discussions were carried out with government officials and other stakeholders. Using the collected data, value chain of the marine ornamental fishery in Trincomalee was analyzed, as well as the selling price of fish and invariates was evaluated at each level of the production flow. This is the result that I gained. There are 3 main operational components of the marine ornamental fishery in Trincomalee. Those are fish collectors, middlemen, exporters. Rather than those 3 components, local aquarium were played a minor role by purchasing 2% of harvest of fishes. At the fishers level, boatmen did the most compulsory act in the production supply chain. They were participated in water quality maintenance of the fish storage containers at the sea, as well as other operational works of the boats were done by the boatmen. Other than the boatmen, fuel suppliers, diving equipment suppliers, fishing vessel suppliers also played a major role in the input flow. Then fish collectors send their harvest to the middlemen. The middlemen distribute their harvest to exporters and local aquariums. At the middlemen and exporters level, accountants and other supportive staffs were played a major role. Accountants managed all monetary aspects of the industry by paying salaries for all employers, as well as other supportive staff involved in fish counting, water quality maintenance of storage tanks, and packing operations. When considering the packing operations and storage facilities, the accessories for packing and storage tanks were supplied by those suppliers. Then let's see what are the supportive and regulatory authorities of the industry. Those are Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka Navy, Sri Lanka Customs, NARA, National Aquatic Resource Research and Development Agency, as well as the Marine Environmental Protection Authority, NEPA, Sri Lanka Export Development Board, Divisional Secretariat Office, and Urban Council are the supportive and regulatory authorities. When considering those things, Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resource plays the major role in the service flow by issuing permits for fishers and exporters, by registering fishing vessels, by regulating prohibited, restricted species and illegal fishing gears, as well as they are regulating maintenance operations of the exporting companies. Next to the DFAR, Sri Lanka Navy was engaged in checking the permits of divers and fishing vessels, as well as monitoring illegal fishing gears and inspecting fish harvest to check whether there are prohibited fish or illegal fishing. NARA and NEPA was conducting awareness program on this ecosystem, and they were researching on coral reef and coral reef environment. Division Secretariat Office were engaged.
You have 2 minutes more. Bind up.
Okay. Then I concluded my research. The long chain between the fishers and the exporters facilitated gaining a lower selling price at the fishing level. So the government intervention for the price determination should be strength than this level. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Now our next speaker is Samina. So please be brief.
Yes, sir. Is my slides are visible, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Full screen.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairman, Chairman of the session, the co-chairman, and the respectable members. My topic is Bean to Bite Chocolate, a model value chain for cocoa growers. We represent the ICR CPCRI Kasaragod, Kerala. So it's all about how a bean in a household or farm level, we can process it into a bean to bite chocolate, which is having very good demand in the market. So cocoa is known as the food of God. It is an important beverage crop of the world. In India, it is mainly grown as an intercrop in coconut and arecanut gardens. And National Horticulture Mission has identified cocoa as a potential crop to meet the domestic and export demand. In India, the states such as Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu are the major cocoa producing states. Then currently we are importing cocoa beans and cocoa powder to bridge the gap between the supply and the demand in the domestic market. So there is a huge scope. And there are lots of cottage level processing units are emerging, because daily we are getting so many inquiries from mainly from the southern states. Even recently, our DDG has quoted that cocoa production has to be self-reliant in Indian economy. So then a simple brief on the cocoa production to the this is a roadmap to the chocolate making. So it will take around 2 to 4 years for flowering and fruiting, depending upon the type of clones, and the quality of produce is mainly depend upon the fermentation of cocoa beans and the storage. So we have in our institute, there is a cocoa harvested for mainly for the targeting the small and marginal farmers, mainly the ladies. And during the post-harvest processing, fermentation, drying are the major critical processing aspect in which needs to be focused more. And we in our CPCRA Vittal station also giving training to the farm women for better fermentation technology. So on this background, what we have made here was, it was the last year's work. We have come out with a bean to bar technology from cocoa beans to the chocolate. So with our initial and preliminary trials and experiments, we have seen the minimum and maximum level of the ingredients needed. One is cocoa liquor. Cocoa liquor is nothing but the grinded cocoa beans. Then cocoa butter to get the smooth texture as compared to the commercial available dark chocolates. Then we have incorporated coconut sugar as a source of sweetener. It is low in glycemic index and it is very healthy and natural. So the processing parameters also, we have standardized: roasting temperature of 130°, time of 20 and 24 hours of quenching time. So we have studied the mixture analysis and the statistical evaluation also been done, and we have optimized that combination of cocoa liquor, cocoa butter and coconut sugar. 45, 25 and 30% was the optimum for making bean to bar chocolate. And in continuation with that, we have set up a small scale bean to bar chocolate unit in our institute, and it is now being given for incubation facility. And the total cost around, if an entrepreneur or a farmer having around 4 lakh rupees, he or she can make her own chocolate unit in along with the farm. So this our product was also released during the last foundation day, and we already have a collaboration with 2 firms. One is Cocoa Crate, and recently one of the nearby processing industry, Usha's Dreams in Kasaragod, Kerala, they have taken our incubation facility. They are using it now since recently they have taken the incubation facility, and also they have taken our technology. And apart from that, we have demonstrated to different groups. Even this is from farmers from Andhra Pradesh, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. We have given the training. Apart from that, we have coconut processing machineries. With that, how best the cocoa butter and cocoa powder can be extracted, that sort of trials are also going on. So if a farmer who is having 20 plants in and around us, mainly in the crop of coconut, cocos are grown in coastal areas. So around if a farmer is having 20 plants, he can earn up to 10,000 to 20,000 chocolate per batch of from total to 20 palms. So this is about our conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumina, for concluding your observation within time. Now, I have just, Dr. Hussain, would you like to make some final comments as a co-chair?
Thank you, Chairman. You may comments and you may conclude the session. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, friends. Of course, it was a very exciting session covering different aspects of, value chain, from what you can say from seed or technologies to the final consumers. And I have just one observations across this, that coastal aquaculture has a lot of promises, particularly for the high value production of high value commodities and all those high value commodities. But one of the things that can be exported, the countries in the regions, be it Bangladesh or India or Sri Lanka, they can earn huge foreign exchange from exporting these commodities. But what we observe is that the value chains are poorly developed or are not developed at all for most of these commodities. There may be certain reasons for that, maybe small scale production, lack of aggregators or lack of financing. So all this kind, or maybe a policy environments, they may be lacking. So the countries need to create, kind of enabling conditions for developing the value chains. And my observation for this one from your study, there are 2 or 3 factors what I come to. This one is the absence of value chain. There is a huge price spread between producers and the consumers, be it in case of seaweed particularly in case of seaweed in Bangladesh, huge price difference. So how we can make farmers to capture the value-added benefits, it is basically either the exporters or the intermediaries. Now, another is that this of course indicates a poor bargaining power of the producers. Another is important point that has emerged is that reliance of more producers, particularly the intermediaries, for inputs and their credit needs. And these intermediaries, of course, they need to be studied from the perspective of provision of credit, kind of used to be huge in this region, particularly land, labor, credit markets, and that they were termed as to be, exploitative. So this new intervenes, these intermediaries or the linkages between the producers and the intermediaries, they need to be studied. And this is an excellent issue for the agricultural economics. Conclude there is a huge scope for development of the coastal commodities produced in the some kind of right kind of investment value chain developments. With this, I thank you all the presenters and all the participants in this session, and to the thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Organizers
Thank you.
available here.
Yes, sir. Sir, on behalf of ISCAR, I thank Chairman Sir Dr. P.S. Bidthal, Co-Chairman Dr. M. Ismail Hussain, and Rapporteur Dr. P. Swamina Begum for nicely conducting the session. And please announce the finish of the session.
Can I say, Chairman sir, could you open the video mode all so that we can take a snapshot?
Okay. No, it's already open.
Some of us are not open yet.
No, mine is open.
Just may I request all of them to open the video mode?
Dr. P.R. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Unmute yourself. Oh, yeah, she is there now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, Sinoj, how are you?
Fine, sir. Thank you.